We've all heard the classic moral dilemma. Would you save a loved one by sacrificing a stranger? It's a question that challenges our values, ethics, and sense of right and wrong. But what if the stranger in question could be anyone? Someone unknown, or perhaps someone famous or influential? This scenario introduces a new layer of complexity. Would it change your decision if the stranger was, say, a world leader, a famous actor, or a groundbreaking scientist? In this video, we'll explore how this moral dilemma would play out with a fresh twist, diving into the psychology, ethics, and societal implications of such a choice. At the core of this moral dilemma lies the conflict between emotion and reason. The immediate response for many might be to save a loved one, driven by the powerful emotional bond we share with those closest to us. The instinct to protect those we love is deeply ingrained in human nature. Yet, a rational perspective could lead to a different conclusion. If the stranger were someone with immense influence or fame, perhaps a groundbreaking scientist or a world leader, their life might be seen as holding greater value to society. In such a scenario, one might argue that their potential to impact the world makes their survival more significant. This creates a dilemma between choosing the emotional attachment to someone you care about and the logical argument of preserving a person whose contributions could shape history. Ultimately, this decision would reflect not just our values but also whether we lean more towards emotion or rationality in moral decisions. This dilemma also raises the issue of the value of life itself. Should every life be considered equal, or do we assign more worth to individuals based on their status, influence, or potential impact? When facing this choice, we are forced to confront the concept of worth and whether we view people as equals regardless of their social standing or fame. If the stranger is a famous scientist whose work could cure diseases, or a politician who could broker world peace, would their death feel like a greater loss because of their potential to change the world? Alternatively, is it ethical to prioritize one life over another based on the individual's influence or position in society? This question challenges our understanding of fairness and equality, and forces us to consider if the value society places on a person's contributions should affect how we make life or death decisions. The dilemma doesn't just touch on the value of an individual's life, but also on the broader impact of saving one life over another. If the stranger in question is someone who could contribute greatly to the world, we may wonder if their death would be a greater loss to society than the death of a loved one. Imagine the impact on global progress if a leading scientist were to perish. Could the potential loss of their discoveries be considered a tragedy on a global scale, compared to the personal pain of losing someone close to us? Conversely, some might argue that no individual's life should ever be weighed against the collective benefit they could bring to the world. Is it right to sacrifice one person's life, even for a potential greater good? This thought experiment forces us to consider the role of individual sacrifice in the larger picture of societal advancement. When fame and influence are factored into the equation, the moral dilemma becomes even more complex. Would the presence of fame or influence change your decision? Famous people, due to their ability to influence millions, often have their lives seen as more significant than others. But is this a fair assessment of their value? In a scenario where the stranger is a well-known actor or politician, many might feel compelled to save them, believing that their fame gives them a greater societal worth. However, others would argue that fame should not alter the fundamental value of a human life. Is the decision to save a famous person more about their contributions to society, or is it driven by the public's perception of their worth? This dilemma invites us to question the role of fame in shaping our moral choices, and whether we should allow a person's status to influence decisions that involve life and death. The concept of sacrifice itself plays a critical role in this moral dilemma. Would you feel selfish for choosing to save your loved one, even if it meant the death of someone who could change the course of history? Choosing to save a loved one might seem instinctive and understandable, but could it be seen as a selfish act if it comes at the expense of the greater good? On the other hand, some might view sacrificing a loved one as a noble act, especially if the person they would save is someone who could contribute greatly to society. However, this perspective brings with it the emotional complexity of making such a decision. Would you feel guilty for choosing to save someone you love over someone whose impact on the world could be profound? This tension between personal feelings and the greater good makes the decision deeply emotional and ethically difficult. When we consider the moral frameworks that could guide this decision, two major ethical perspectives emerge: utilitarianism and deontological ethics. A utilitarian perspective would suggest that the morally right decision is the one that leads to the greatest overall benefit. From this point of view, sacrificing a loved one for the greater good of society, especially if the stranger is a person who could significantly impact humanity, could be seen as the ethically correct choice. However, this idea clashes with deontological ethics, which emphasizes the importance of duties and rights, regardless of the consequences. According to deontologists, sacrificing a loved one for the benefit of others might be morally wrong because it violates the principle of duty to protect those we care about. In either case, the decision depends on which ethical framework we prioritize: one focused on maximizing overall happiness, or one focused on fulfilling our duties to individuals. The immediacy of the impact versus its long-term consequences also plays a role in the decision-making process. Saving a loved one would provide immediate emotional relief, with clear and tangible results. In contrast, the stranger, especially if they are influential, may offer long-term societal benefits that are harder to quantify in the moment. The person you choose to save might have a direct personal impact on your life, but the stranger's contributions could shape the future in ways that aren't immediately apparent. This aspect of the dilemma forces us to weigh the value of short-term emotional satisfaction against the potential long-term impact of saving someone who could bring about major societal change. The tension between personal and collective responsibility is another crucial aspect of this dilemma. If you're solely focused on your loved ones, the decision would reflect your responsibility toward those closest to you. However, if you broaden your responsibility to include society at large, the ethical landscape shifts. The stranger, particularly if they are influential, represents a larger responsibility, a duty to contribute to the greater good. This creates a shift in moral perspective from one that is grounded in personal loyalty to one that focuses on the collective well-being of society. This change highlights the complexity of balancing individual responsibilities with our broader obligations to the world around us. Lastly, we cannot overlook the psychological and emotional consequences of making such a decision. The emotional aftermath of choosing between a loved one and a stranger would be profound, regardless of the outcome. If you choose to sacrifice your loved one, you might feel guilt and sorrow for the decision, knowing that you have forever altered someone else's life for the sake of the greater good. Conversely, saving your loved one could lead to feelings of doubt and anguish, particularly if the stranger's loss is seen as a tragedy with lasting global implications. The emotional weight of either choice could be overwhelming and carry long-lasting psychological consequences, not just for the individual making the decision, but also for the people around them. The dilemma of whether to save a loved one by sacrificing a stranger forces us to confront the complexities of human emotions, relationships, and our ethical frameworks. The added twist of a stranger being someone famous or influential further deepens the moral complexity of the situation. At the heart of it, the question challenges us to consider whether the worth of a person's life is determined by their personal connections, their potential societal impact, or the balance between the two. What would you do in this situation? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into moral dilemmas and thought-provoking questions.